Welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of Pen to Pod, where I sat down with Britney S. Lewis to talk about her latest book, Blood Moon. I actually put this episode on pause because I wanted Blood Moon in my hands, me having read some of it before I chatted with you for this intro. I ordered the special edition of Blood Moon. It has beautiful sprayed edges from Bookshop forever ago, it feels like, because I have been seeing Blood Moon everywhere on social media, and maybe you have too, and that's why you're clicking on this episode. It has everything I want in a story, and I have been waiting for this to come out. And I had already predicted that this is going to be one of my favorite books this year, and I can confidently say, now that I tore open the package and I instantly climbed into bed to read this book, cozied on up and stayed up for hours, that this is definitely going to be one of my favorite books this year. Britney's writing and her world building and the characters that she has created really all just come to life on the page. I love a novel set at university, and this also has some of my favorite elements, all the paranormal elements of werewolves and vampires, and there's a love triangle, and the characters are just so in depth, and I connect to all of them, and it is so amazing. I absolutely love it, just like I knew I would. But now I can officially say this is going to be a top book for me. So if you like anything that I just said about this book or anything that Britney says in this interview, and I have a feeling you will, please go check out Blood Moon. Go buy it and support Britney, or request it from your library or your local bookstores, because it's truly a great read and great for the fall time coming up as well. But here's a little bit more about Blood Moon. 18-year-old Mira Owens grew up in Timber Plains, Kansas, hearing all about the local legend that werewolves had, many years ago, traveled to their small Midwest town to protect humans from the growing threat of a vampire enclave. Just a story, of course, a fairy tale, one Mira had stopped believing in when she was young, just like she stopped believing in the idea of her mom returning after she up and left without a trace when she was only 13. Mira is grown up now, starting freshman year at the nearby Lakeland University. Except for one particular classmate, Julian Santos, a mysterious boy with long hair, golden eyes, and a coldness that seems directed exclusively at Mira for reasons she can't understand and he won't explain. When Mira receives an unaddressed letter from her mother, she's told the world isn't as it seems. She suspects her mom might be telling the truth when she stumbles across strange animal tracks on a hiking trail, and when she's miraculously saved from a 20-foot drop by the one and only Julian Santos. The problem? Julian would have had to jump the length of the cliff to catch her, making him incredibly fast and strong beyond belief. When she confronts him about this, he denies everything. But when a blood moon rises, Mira soon finds herself caught in the middle of an ancient magical war with Julian on the other side of the line. She discovers there's much more truth to the old town legends than she could have ever anticipated, and her family's historic role in it will change her world forever. I mean, come on. What is not to love about this? You guys have to read it. It is so good. Britney S. Lewis is the Kansas award-winning author of The Undead Truth of Us, The Dark Place, and the upcoming paranormal romance series, Blood Moon. She has a BA in corporate communications with an emphasis in business and art, and she lives in Kansas City. I really loved this conversation with Britney, and when I went back and edited this a couple of weeks ago, one thing I really loved was how much it really did feel like me talking to a friend. So, Brittany, if you're listening, I adored this conversation with you, and I learned so much. We talked a lot about how this process changed on this book versus her first two books, how writing a series is a lot different, how she got into the mind of her characters, and also how she started to shift or change some of the more traditional or widespread use of the lores of werewolves and vampires for her own book. It was just such a great conversation on process, but also on passion. Listening back, you can just hear how passionate Britney is as a storyteller about this story in particular as well, and it shows in her writing. And that was just really beautiful to re-listen to this episode hear that passion, and then immediately, I guess not immediately, in the next couple of weeks, then go to read her book that came out. And it is evident in this episode and on the page that Brittany's passion shines through. But enough talking from me. Let's jump into it. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Brittany. I love to start out my interviews in asking about place. I feel like it's something I think about a lot when I'm writing or when I'm reading. I love when place is setting or it's like a character in its own right. And I saw on your website that you're based in Kansas. And I just would love to know, how do you feel like place has impacted your writing or who you are in any way?
Yeah, I love talking about place and where I'm from. I I grew up and have always lived in Kansas. I mean, I guess there was a small stint where I lived in Missouri, which if you've been to Kansas City and Missouri actually share a similar city name. So there's Kansas City, Kansas, and there's Kansas City,
Mhm.
Missouri, and people who are not from here have no idea what the difference is, and that's okay. But I'm from the Kansas City, Kansas side, and there's always been like a rivalry against KCK and KC and I've always been a really proud Kansan, and I grew up in a weird, like, part of town where it was kind of like the inner city, but it was also kind of country, just depended on
Mm.
where you went. So, like, it was very much like very diverse population, which I have never known anything outside of that until I moved. And then there were some areas as well that was like super woodsy, lots of animals, horses normally going up and down the street. It was like very common and strange because you wouldn't normally think about that in like an inner city area. But that's Kansas City, Kansas for you. And yeah, I love it. It definitely affected the way that I tell stories, mostly because I never saw and or read many things that took place in Kansas. Supernatural takes place in Kansas, in Lawrence, Kansas, about 40 minutes from where I
Mm.
am. And I quickly became obsessed with the show once it came out because I was like, oh, monsters, Kansas? That's exactly what
Yeah.
I want to do. So I've always been a hardcore Supernatural fan, mostly because of the location of it. And then I like fell in love with obviously the characters, and the storylines were definitely up my alley. But I knew that I wanted to tell a story that took place in Kansas because we've had such a interesting mix of like history here. And I've never seen like a TV show or a book set in Kansas City, Kansas, or in this Midwestern kind of like town element with paranormal. You always see
Yeah.
paranormal like in a Chicago area or
Hmm.
in Seattle or in like Georgia, but you don't really see it in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm from Ohio, so I relate to like nothing set in Ohio. That's a great motivator to tell more stories from different places. And then, of course, I have to ask the question that we all ask is, when did you know you wanted to be a writer? Was there a specific place where you're like, okay, this like clicked and I know I want to take this as a career instead of just a hobby?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I love this question, even though it does get asked all the time. I love it mostly just because, like, I like hearing about it from other authors and how they got their start. So it brings me a lot of inspiration, and it always brought me a lot of inspiration as I was like making my little journey. But I consider myself have always being like a writer, just because I was really into journaling. And in third grade, I got this journal. It's so embarrassing. In third grade, I got this journal, and I would like document everything that happened in my life. Like, I would come home and I was so excited to be like, Dear Diary.
I
And then I
love
would talk about like everything that happened in recess.
it.
Like, I still have this exact same diary. And it's crazy because it like starts in third grade and it ends in college because that's like all the pages that were left. And yeah, it's interesting because it's me complaining about being sick at recess, or like the friends that I had at the time, or the drama that would be happening between my friends. There's like a documentation of like me having a crush on one of my neighbors across the street. There's this neighbor boy that I had a big crush on. And I remember this evening where I was across the street and we were playing this truth or dare or kiss game. And I was like, oh my God, he almost kissed me. And I remember thinking that, like, I don't want anyone to know about this moment if they read my diary. So I like scribbled it out in like colorful crayon, but you could
Oh my
still very much
gosh. I
read the
love
entire page.
that.
I was so dramatic. But so I've always been like someone that has loved documenting, and I've always loved like telling some kind of story, even if it was like just the events of what happened of the day. But I would say the moment that I became like wanting to be an author that's writing and publishing books was when I was 17. I had just finished Twilight Saga completely. Like I had finished the last book and I was in what I now know was a reading slump. I had no idea what that
Yeah.
was. And I couldn't figure out what I wanted to read next. Like there was nothing that I had yet come across that had the same tropes as Twilight.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do with myself. It was like the summertime. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was at home. I was really bored, but I had a computer that I had gotten from my high school. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to just tell my own story. Like, I'm going to just do it right now. I'm going to write my own book. It's going to be a thing. And I remember some of that reasoning being because I despised some of the decisions that Bella Swan made in the Twilight Saga. And I also really just wanted like more diversity. I remember like finishing that story and thinking like, I really enjoyed it, but I wished that there was a wider range of people that were represented because I wanted to see myself in a story that was similar to that. And and I knew that I would make different decisions than Bella Swan. And so I had decided I'm going to write a story. It's going to be today. And I never looked back.
I love that. I like that you pointed out that you've always considered yourself a writer by documenting, because I feel like that's a type of writing that kind of goes unnoticed sometimes, like the journaling aspect or being in tune with the world around you by writing it down. I feel like that's a really great like skill and quality to have as a writer. And I'm jealous because I feel like I've always been that person who like starts and tries and then,
Yeah.
you know, you fill up like 20 pages and then it's like over. And then you start again 3 years later and you're like, dear diary, this time I will do it. So I love that you've been documenting for so long, and that's kind of where your love for storytelling began, with just your own story, just documenting your own story, and that's really, really cool. Also, I love Twilight, and I also agree Bella made not the best decisions. So that's another
Oh,
great way
Bella.
to write. Out of spite, you were fueled by spite. You're like, we'll do this better, Bella. We'll make better
It is
decisions.
it has continued to for sure motivate me as my career has progressed in this industry. So we use rage and vengeance and spite to tell stories. And I love that
Yes.
about us.
It's a powerful emotion. And you said
Yeah.
you were dramatic, which I can relate to because I saw on your fun facts in your bio that you're an INFP and a Pisces. And I was like, me
Oh my
too.
God.
Me
No
too,
way.
Brittany. Yes. And I just feel like
That's
we're
so magic.
emotional little baby beans sometimes. So do you
Mhm.
feel like that impacts your writing at all? Like when you're writing characters?
Yes, absolutely. I think more so when I was younger, because like when you're writing a story for the first time, and or you read fan fiction, they read very similarly
Mm.
because everything is super dramatic and also a lot of the details like make no sense to the plot. Like it's like I was wearing these long jeans with XYZ and my hair was pulled back like this. You know, it's like always this
Yes.
very dramatic, like you have to know each scene about what character is wearing and what they're listening to. Like there's a lot of song drops, there's a lot of like media references. Like you're just
Mhm.
getting everything down to help explain like the vibe of your character and their aesthetic. And but yeah, I would definitely say that like all my books have been a bit dramatic and a bit emotional just because I have found myself to be a bit dramatic and a bit emotional and I would not have admitted that I was a dramatic person, but looking back on some of the decisions I've made in my life, I'm like, yeah, that's me and that's my drama.
Yes. I feel like that's growth though. I feel like as a kid, I like shied away from the use of the word dramatic because I was always used so negatively. But now as an adult, I'm like, you know what? I am dramatic and it's fine sometimes. Sometimes we need to be a little more
Facts.
dramatic, in my opinion. Helps
Facts.
get our
I
point
agree.
across.
Snaps to that, my friend. Snaps.
Yes. But I've been excited to talk about or to talk with you because Blood Moon has been You have been so prevalent on my internet, Brittany. Like your marketing campaign is great. And it's just you being you on the internet. And I'm loving every second of it. I follow you, I think, on every platform I have because any little morsel you give us of Blood Moon, I've been so excited. I've pre ordered the fancy edition from Bookshop. I'm ready to go. So I just need you to know I'm like fangirling because I'm so excited for Blood Moon. But I know you say a lot on Instagram threads and all these places I
Yeah.
follow you that Vampire Diaries has been a huge inspiration for Blood Moon. Do you feel like that was the initial spark that you had for the story? Or were there other, like, was it a character, a scene, a place? Like, what other things kind of started to come together to inspire you to write Blood Moon?
Oh my God, Michaela. Oh my God. Okay, this is definitely like the chaos of the story of how I got Blood Moon. But
Yes,
I
I love
must
it.
first admit that, like, thank you for one, following me on all my platforms. I want you to know that I feel cringe every time I post anything. But also, I can't believe that it has worked the way that it has. Like, I would never have
Yes.
imagined that, like, I'm showing up on anyone's feed because it just wasn't happening for a long time. So
Mhm.
thank you for holding tight and looking at all of my very cringy videos and posts. I adore you.
I love every single one. I'm always like. Brittany posts doesn't thing. Like.
Oh my God, you're the best. Okay. Blood Moon. How did I get the story? Like, how did it come to me? Was it inspired by the Vampire Diaries? I don't know if I've talked about this enough. Like, I always, like, on my platforms talk about, like, it's like funny, Bennett's revenge, which is true. But I will say that I got the idea for Blood Moon, like, oh my God, it was like some random, like, dark winter, and I was feeling really depressed. And I, like, was heavy on book talk. Like, I was always on book talk. I was honestly trying to figure out the algorithm. But, like, while doing that, like, I'm scrolling through, like, just all the things that people are talking about and all the tropes. And I remember just being really, really, like, upset that there just wasn't enough representation in the paranormal fantasy space and in the fantasy space in general, where there was like a black main character who existed not because they were black, but just because they were a
Mm.
person that happened to be black in this space where they could, like, have love and be the chosen one and, like, be the one that people are fighting over and have all the decisions. And I just wanted and I craved that so much. And at this point, I want to say it was like 2022 when I started writing Blood Moon. Or yeah, I like we started getting, like, Legendborn. We were getting, like, we
Mhm.
had like the Children of Blood and Bone series, but they were kind of different in that way. Like they're very, like, I would say Legendborn I love. It is more of like a heavier story and a heavier storyline and kind of what can happen as a black character going to a PWI and also including magic, right? So, and finding a mother and death, like heavy elements, which I absolutely relate to. But so as I'm in this dark pit during one of these winters, I'm watching Siren. And I remember watching Siren. Have you seen that, by the way, the TV show?
No. But I'm instantly gonna write it down about mermaids.
Yes, about these killer
Love.
mermaids that show up on this coastal town in, like,
Was this a
Washington.
CW show?
This was a CW show,
Then
absolutely.
yes. No, you said yes. I've absolutely watched this years ago. I feel like I've
Yes,
watched anything. That's also why every time you post, people are like, "This is like CW," and I'm like, I was obsessed. Anything CW was putting out paranormal related, it was feeding me. So yes, I've seen this years
yes.
ago. Yes.
I loved it. I loved it. I didn't know about it until 2022. And I think one of my sister-in-law had, like, was like, "Oh, you should watch Siren." And I'm like, "What the hell is that?" I was like, "You know what? Yes, I'm going to start watching it." I watched the entire 3 seasons that were available on Hulu, like, in a week. Like, I was pretty obsessed, and I was drawn in because one of the main characters, Maddie Bishop, was a Black woman in STEM, and I'm like, "Yes, like, this is incredible," and she was dating, like, the cute guy who was also the one of the main characters, and I was sucked in, and then they end up discovering that these sirens exist, and then they end up finding themselves in, like, a
Mm.
throuple relationship with this mermaid, but then the story goes south because they eventually kick Maddie out of this relationship. And it just made me
Mm.
so upset because you start seeing less and less of Maddie Bishop as the seasons progress and as the storylines progress. And then you find out that the main guy is actually more in love with like the siren than he is with Maddie, and they end up breaking up. It was just this whole thing. I was not okay with it. I was very upset. I was watching, like, I was looking at Reddit posts, like, I was just so upset. And the other reason I was upset was because a lot of the sirens, especially in the first season, were like described as evil, bad, the villains of the stories. They were all Black women, and that also
Mm.
made me really upset. So I finished Siren and I started rewatching The Vampire Diaries, and that is when I was like, I'm done. Like I started like going down this rabbit hole of like seeing I hadn't known previously like all the stuff that was happening to Kat Graham behind the scenes,
Yeah.
learning about like how, Bonnie Bennett, like her character arc, well, first off, everything that happens to her in the Vampire Diaries is really upsetting. And watching it again with adult eyes, you see it so much more clearly. And I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna write my own story. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna like tell my own story. I want something with werewolves. I want something with like vampires. I want something where there is a Black main character who doesn't end up like getting the same treatment that Maddie Bishop got in Siren, but doesn't get the same treatment as Bonnie Bennett in The Vampire Diaries. So, me being a Twilight girly and also being obsessed with the werewolves, I'm like, this is perfect. Like, I can like redo the werewolf legend. Like, I can pay some homage to Jacob Black because I was very much Team Jacob. Um,
Me
thank
too.
you, thank you.
Yes.
It's
I know
controversial.
we're alone in this. I feel like we're a small group out there.
We are a small, dying group of Team Jake. And you know what? Like, I liked Jake a lot because he was super sweet, and I understand that many of the
Yeah.
choices that he made were despicable. Like some of the things that he did were not forgivable. But I want to say that for me, as a teenager reading that book, he was my only character of color that like I fell for. And
Yeah.
as the movies came out, like when I tell you I had the posters like up on my like it was everything. It was everything to me. So I was like, I'm gonna take all of this vengeance and I'm gonna put it into the story, and that's when I started writing Blood Moon. And honestly, like I got the idea for it, like, and I wrote out the entire synopsis from beginning to end within a week. It's never happened before for me
Wow.
ever. And then I wrote the first
Yeah.
50 pages within like that exact same week. Like I was like, this is gonna be the story. She's going to university. It's gonna be in Kansas because we want that. I started doing research on like wolves in Kansas and like
Mm.
starting to kind of like come up with my own legends that I could spin into this research that I found about timber wolves that were very
Mm.
common on the prairies in the Kansas area and in the Midwest in general. And I started putting all my favorite pieces of like media. I was so excited about this idea. Like I already knew it was going to be called Blood Moon. That's all I knew, and I knew the main characters who they were going to be. And then I emailed my agent like in the middle of the night, and I was like, "Oh my god, Caitlin, this is my idea. Like, what do you think about this? Like, do you think it could sell? Like, do you think it's a good story idea?" There wasn't anything similar to it that had sold yet, but there was some traction picking up in the book talk space where there were some authors kind of talking about having like Black vampires in their romance. I'm thinking of Tigist Girma. She had pitched her idea of Immortal Dark on Book Talk around this time, and she was starting to get a lot of traction. I found it so funny because at this point, like, I had already started writing my story, and I was like, Caitlin, like, do you think this
Yes,
could
I did.
be a story that we could maybe sell? And she read the first 50 pages in the synopsis, and she was like, oh my God, write the entire thing. And I was like, say less, I will. So within that next 4 weeks, I had finished completely writing all of Blood Moon. And I think I want to say that I started it maybe February, finished it before my husband's birthday in March, and then sent it to Caitlin by the end of the March after I did my quote unquote edits of it, the draft
Yeah.
zero. It was bad. Um, and Caitlin was so excited about the story and she just loved it. And so that's kind of like how I came up with the idea for Blood Moon. But I will say that, and I haven't told many people this yet, but there was a moment in which we were on submission with Blood Moon like a year later. And I was talking to Tracy Dion and I was telling her, like, I've never written a series before. Like, I just want some
Mhm.
advice. Like, tell me everything you know about writing series because you're doing an incredible job. She was in the middle of writing Oathbound. Like, the title hadn't been announced yet to anyone. And we were on a call, like you and I. And so she's like, well, tell me about your book. Like, give me a pitch. So I gave her a pitch of the story. And she was like, oh, so like the Vampire Diaries? And I was like, oh my God. Duh. Yes. Why did I not put this together? There are so many similarities. Small towns, these paranormal creatures that live within this town in the broad daylight, but no one knows about it. Like, it's an old like legend that spans back centuries ago. I'm like, Brittany, duh. Oh my God. And I was like, Tracy, thank you. You've opened it up. You've opened up the best marketing tool I could have ever asked for anyone.
Yes.
I appreciate you. So that's how I started like spinning it towards the Vampire Diaries because I already like had Bonnie Bennett in mind, but as for like the actual story in the series of TVD, like I didn't have that in mind when I was going into writing the book. I was really just like, I'm angry. I want vampires. I want werewolves. I need it to be in the Midwest. Let's go. And then I was like, oh my God, yes. Let me finish watching, like rewatching the show and let me just like see like where I can surprise myself while I'm on submission waiting for this to be sold.
Yeah. Okay, I love this origin story. Again, we love vengeance and spite, like we already said, as a great tool
Yes.
to get stuff done. So you start with this amazing idea. It's like a little seed. You know where you want it to go. You know what you're trying to do with the story. What happened next? It seems like the synopsis came flowing out of you. You got 50 pages. Like, how did you know what to do next? Did you sit down and outline everything, or were you just like, I'm just going to write and see where this takes me? Or did like the conflict and the full story just come to you kind of immediately?
Yeah, I would say the entire story kind of came to me pretty quickly. So whenever I wrote that
Mm-hmm.
synopsis, I also wrote an entire outline. And when I wrote the outline, I was like, okay, cool. Here's the bones of the story. Also, FYI, I've never been an outliner. This industry has
Okay.
turned me into an outliner,
Yeah.
but we do what we can. So as I like started writing the story, because I'm naturally like a pantser, I started pantsing other ideas as the story progressed.
Mm.
So the outline really is a living idea that turns into something totally different when the book is actually done. But yeah, as I started writing with this outline in mind, the story really started to twist, it really started to turn, and I kind of like knew like all the like meet cues for the love interest. I kind of knew like where I wanted to go. I kind of knew all of the bigger plot points and the twist towards the end of the story, but I didn't have like all of the leads together.
Yeah.
And I think it was my excitement to get to those plot points that kept me pulling forward and getting to the end of the book. And I was like, yes, like this is the book of my heart. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. This industry has made you a plotter. How do you plot now then? Or how did you do it for Blood Moon? Do you adhere to like a certain like structure or outline, or do you kind of inherently understand where you want to go? I feel like everyone kind of plots a little differently.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone does their own little thing. I would say for me, I use Save the Cat writes a
Mm-hmm.
story, and that is for anyone listening that is not familiar. Save the Cat is a tool that screenwriters use to write movies, and it's really easy because it's broken up into 3 acts. It's a 3 act story structure, and you have your first act, your second, your middle act, and then your last one. And in between those acts, there's multiple story beats. And I use that to plot out all my stories because it makes the most sense for me. I'm
Mm.
not naturally a plotter. I'm naturally I've always naturally written stories that are character driven, and that's where I get in trouble when it comes to writing a story that you can pull it completely together. And because I knew that that was my weakness, I had to find tools to help me learn how to be a better plotter. And so I knew kind of where to go and how to drive the story and how to ramp up the chaos because of using
Yeah.
Save the Cat, right? The story. And that's always been my biggest tool. I recently found a software called Plotter,
Oh, mm-hmm.
Plottr. And I found it because Lizelle Stanberry, she has a YouTube channel. She's an author,
An amazing YouTube channel. It's a wealth
right?
of knowledge. Yes, yes.
It's
She's helped me
incredible.
with the fun and games section because that's my least favorite section. And I have
Yes.
that video bookmarked.
That's so good. Yeah, I love her. And I'm always like, before I was published, like I was like watching all of her things. Like I was just always really excited about everything that she posted. And I remember she talked about Plotter, and there was a 2-week free trial. And so I used it, and it
Mhm.
changed my life forever. It changed the game of like how I could write. And it was like basically having sticky notes, but being able to move things around piece by piece based on how the story changes as you write, which for me, being a natural pantser was super helpful.
Yeah,
And I'm obsessed. So,
right.
yes.
Okay, writing this down as well. I've heard of it. I just haven't like looked into it, so I'll have to look into it after our call. Um, okay, so you are a natural pantser. You've plotted a bit, but I like how you talked about it as like a living, breathing outline to give yourself some wiggle room as you write. How many drafts do you usually do? I know that you said like 0 drafts. So is that something that's kind of ingrained in the process, or is it also just different for every book?
It is different for every book. I will say prior to being published, so with my debut novel was called The Undead Truth of Us. And I
Mhm.
wrote that I would say fall 2019 going into 2020. And always for me, my ritual pre-publish was I write draft 0, and then I'm always editing, always editing. I would always be working with like a critique partner and beta readers, and they would help me kind of polish up the story to whatever it ends up being. So I write multiple drafts depending on edits. And then
Mhm.
after being published and getting my first book deal, it was a 2-book deal. The first book being The Undead Truth of Us, the second book being an untitled story of my
Mhm.
choosing. And I was like, oh shit, like, how do I do this thing? Because we always forget how to write a book when you have to write a book
Yes,
again.
every time.
Every time. And
Yes.
so that was when, like, having all this pressure under contract, like having to like write a story within a certain amount of time, I didn't have the grace of like having all of these beta readers and these critique readers. And I just had like my agent and my editor. And so I wrote The Dark Place um, unwillingly in the midst of COVID, sad and depressed at my house, literally
Yeah.
snowed in. And I wrote it all, and then I rewrote it all. And then I rewrote it all. And this like has never been a phenomenon that's happened for me by myself, because I was
Mm.
my own critique partner at that point and I didn't know how to tell the story. It was including time travel. I didn't know like where to go from there, and all my research, like I couldn't put everything in this book. It was a
Yeah.
single story. I needed it to be concise. I needed it to make sense. And so that's probably the only book that I've like written, scrapped, rewritten, scrapped, rewritten again, and then been like, okay, I'm done with this. I never want to look at it again.
Yeah.
That's draft 5. I'm sending it to my editor because I have to, because this is the end of my deadline. And from there, we kind of like shaped it up to be the book that it is now.
Mhm.
But that was the only story where it's kind of been that way. Generally, I write draft 0, I clean it up a little bit, I send it to my agent, and then depending on if we're on submission or not, we edit it together.
Mhm.
But also for the most part, I write draft 0 and then I edit it with my editor.
Yeah. So it seems like I don't know, it seems like you just have an inherent understanding of story because I feel like as a natural pantser, it seems like you're already doing like a good job of like flowing through a story in a draft 0 and then just kind of tweaking it as you go instead of making like major changes, which is really amazing. Do you like the revision process? or how do you feel about revisions?
I love edits. I love it because I can actually, like, I think about it like being able to do pottery and being able to spin on the wheel if you ever like thrown it
Yes.
all. And you start off with this mound and you're like, what the heck am I going to do with this mound of clay? I have no idea. And you slap it on the wheel a few times and you spank it all up. And then you just start like to throw. And as you're throwing and opening it up, you start to like develop more and more of the story. And then you can start like building off of this mound. And
Mhm.
it's for me, that's like draft zero, like having the mound. And then as I'm able to pull and build up this pottery, this piece of clay, it starts to turn into an actual work of art. And that's where I like it the most because even after I've taken it off the wheel, you can add on things, you can like remove
Yeah.
things, you can like really sculpt it to be what you want it to be. And it's not, this mound anymore. It's a full story. And that's why I love edits and I love revisions. Drafting for me is hell. I'm drafting book 2 of Blood
Me
Moon,
too.
and I've been in a living hell. I hate it.
Okay, I love this because you are like the second or third author in a row I've interviewed for this season who's been, I just feel validated that as a writer, drafting feels like hell on earth, like draft one. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is. What do you feel like it is for you? Is it like, I don't know, for me, I feel like the story like moves into my head.
Hmm.
Like they unbox everything. It's just living in my head for so long. So when I have to draft, it's like I'm trying to get someone to move. And that's like the worst
Yeah.
experience ever. What do you feel like for you, like makes drafting, I guess, worse off than revisions?
Yes. This is a good question, Michaela, because I have recently discovered why this happens to me in
Okay.
particular.
Love.
Here's my discovery. My discovery is that Um, I care too much. I care too much about the story. I care too much about everything being perfect. I care too much on a line level of making
Yeah.
words feel the way they're supposed to feel to me. And that puts me back because then I start overthinking and I
Mm.
can't really write if I'm overthinking. I can't really tell a story if I'm second guessing everything I'm putting on the page. And that is one of the reasons why I hate drafting. And that keeps me back because I am my own worst enemy when I'm writing draft zero. I have all these
Yeah.
ideas. I want everything to work out immediately and perfectly. And even though I've done this before and I know it's never going to be perfect, I can't stop the chaos. I
Yes.
can't.
Yes.
So that's the reason I hate drafting. I think as of more recently and writing my very first series, I think my second reason of drafting has been like having early reader feedback come in and
Mm.
seeing how many readers are really anticipating this story now has kind of terrified me because I'm literally just a girl and I
Yeah.
don't have any claim to like having a perfect first series or like being able to tell a fantasy romance or romantasy, whatever you want to call it, in a way that will please everyone. And it's my deep need to people please, like at my core, that scares me. And so that's
Yeah.
also been like really holding up drafting because I'm so afraid that I'm going to let readers down that it's hard for me to tell a story because of my own fear.
Yes. Brittany, I feel like I'm talking to myself. I feel like you're speaking to my inner my inner writer as I write. I relate to that. I think a lot of writers can, and hopefully people who are listening can relate to that too, that it is scary. Like that first draft, even though we see the inspirational videos and the
Hmm.
posts and everyone talking about how we know it can't be perfect, but it is scary to like put the first draft down there because when you do like care about a story too, I feel like, and
Hmm.
that's what you're saying with the second book for the Blood Moon series is like you care now a lot, not just about the story, but about the readers who potentially will be, following this story. And that can make it harder to get it out on the page, which is scary. Do you feel like you've found something that's helped a little with it? Or is it just every day you're like, I'm in the trenches, I will get through this?
Yeah, every day it creeps back in just a little bit, and
Yeah.
it's really just because, like, there's so much easy access to everything these days, like, social media is, oh my goodness, it's a double-edged sword. It's awesome because we are like being able to share these stories with everyone, and we have a deeper connection with readers and other writers in this wonderful community of people who love books. And then also it's terrifying on the same way, in the
Yeah.
same way. And you know, being an author really takes away any involvement that you were ever a reader, right? Like you can't exist in reader spaces the way that you once did. And so I just have all this fear about everything. I have a lot of anxiety that didn't exist before. And I have to like calm these thoughts in my head as I'm writing the second book. And as of recently, it's been so much better. But in the past, like, oh my God, like don't even like let my period think to start to come, because
Yeah.
then I'm gonna be like a spiraling mess of like, I can't write this story. Everyone's gonna hate
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so we have this story, and I already know it's going to be amazing. So I'm excited. You don't have to do much to please me, Brittany. I already know it's going to be amazing from everything
Thank
you're
you.
saying. But you have this story, you write the zero draft, you do little edits. When you're editing, is it more like smaller, like cleaning up things and a lot of like line level and just making sure the story flows? Or did you ever do any like big changes, like a like first person to third person shift, or like
Mm.
adding and deleting chapters? Like, did any of those big changes occur? And if so, how'd you handle that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Blood Moon has gone through so many different changes. Um, because Blood Moon was a book that I wrote in between having a publishing deal, it
Mm,
went through like a decent amount of like pre-sell changes, if that makes sense. So draft zero of Blood Moon was probably about 50,000 words, which for me is pretty normal. I write small books and I build off of them. So I knew that like the plot wasn't really plotting, because there's not really, for me telling an entire fantasy novel, like there's no way that I told an entire story in 50,000 words.
mhm.
So my agent though, she has the best sense of like this editorial mind, and also with the idea of like, you know, selling a book as well. So we were able to kind of edit Blood Moon over the course of a summer. So I would say from March through that fall, we edited Blood Moon back and forth. And I would say we did maybe 3 rounds of edits together. And then we went on submission with Blood Moon. Blood Moon sold, what year is it, 2025? Blood Moon sold in November of 2023. And it was
Mhm.
very specifically during the week of a full moon on new moons, like 20, or like some crazy movie anniversary for the Twilight Saga. It was like kismet. It was
Oh
perfect.
my gosh, that's
It was
amazing.
crazy. And it was on the exact the day that like New Moon had released, which was like a big source of inspiration for me.
Yes,
So I was
yes,
like, this is the universe confirming that this is good news
yes.
for me. And once we sold Blood Moon to my editor, Lauren, who works at Page Street, we then knew in mind that there were going to be different changes. We were going to like change the book, not by a whole lot, but there was a lot that I wanted to add. Like I told her specifically, like, I want the romance to be beefier. I want more tension and chaos. Like, there's more that I really want to do with like the legends and the lore and the story. And I felt confident that she could help me kind of like really shape the book into what I was hoping it would be. And she was excited about the challenge. And so after I got my edit letter from Lauren, that's when Blood Moon started to become really more of what it is today.
Mm.
It's funny because I'm staring at it. It's always on my desk.
Yes.
She's so pretty.
Yay! She's so pretty.
I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with the entire book. But
Yes.
so that's kind of like when we like took, I think it was maybe 60,000 words, 70,000 words when it sold.
Mm.
We took that and we turned it into like 100 and like 100,000 plus words.
Yeah.
And that was like rounds and rounds of edits. And in these edits, we really worked on individual character development. We really worked on making Mira, the main character, more, like real, more realistic in the way that she would
Mhm.
move and breathe in this story. We really brought to life our secondary characters like Seven and Julian, who are two of the love interests in the story. And then I really started adding a bigger cast. Like Mira has friends. Let's bring these friends to life. What are things that they're doing together? How is she interacting with them? And then also, how is this legend, this lore, like interacting and breathing throughout the entire story as well?
Mm. I love that. I love hearing just like the evolution of a book. And I think it's helpful for newer writers too. At least for me also, because I think like when you're a child who loved to read, I just thought all these books were just like, oh, I sat down, I wrote the book, and here it is. So
Yeah.
then when you do go to write, and I'm like in the chaos of my writing, like things are on the walls, and I'm like crying over a third draft. And then I'm like, okay, but this is the process. Like, this is how it happens. So it is
Yes.
like
Yes.
reassuring to know that, books, like you said, like they're living, breathing things, they change and they evolve into the vision. So you talked a little bit about how the Undead Truth of Us, The Dark Place, and now Blood Moon's process has been different. But is there something like story wise that kind of sets Blood Moon apart from your first two books that you wrote?
Yeah, there are a few different things that set Blood Moon apart from my first two books. First off, The End of Truth of Us and The Dark Place are standalone novels,
Mhm.
and I like to think of them in the same universe together. Like there could be a chance where those characters could run into each other, experiencing their own thing, but
Yeah.
they are in a standalone. They are standalone stories. Also, because they are standalone stories, I'm wrapping up an entire story and its world and its ending within 70, 80,000 words, because that was probably the
Mhm.
cap on both of those books. With Blood Moon, it's my first ever like fantasy, really like grounded paranormal fantasy. With The End of Truth of Us, I was writing about zombies and a lot of theoreticals and a lot of like how emotion and your own grief can kind of shape your world to look different than someone else's world. But it was all really this enigma that the main character was experiencing. It wasn't something that other people were experiencing. For The Dark Place, it was also something that was really being affected by the main character, where she has the ability to time travel, and we're talking about quantum physics, and there's a lot more science and things in that book that are definitely a little bit different than Blood Moon. I would categorize those stories as more like speculative horror or speculative fantasy. Blood Moon is a story that is grounded in our reality, but that
Mhm.
has paranormal creatures in it. It's also the first book where I'm writing this romance that takes over the plot just as much as the fantasy does. And so that's a new thing for me. Romance has always been in my stories, but it hasn't been like the source of the stories. And so Blood Moon is this story that has these paranormal elements, but it also has this romance element, and it's also going to expand over multiple books. And that is brand new to me. And it's been very challenging kind of figuring out how to keep the motivation, the drive there to finish this book and then want to immediately start the second book. And I think that I did a good job at like finishing the first book of a series. I saw recently a few reviewers, like early reviewers, say that like this is crazy. I've never seen a double cliffhanger, which I don't think I've considered it
Oh,
as a double cliffhanger, but I can kind of see what they're saying now and the
yeah.
drive to want to immediately start book two. But also, I could see how annoying that would be to end on a double cliffhanger and then have to wait a year for the next book to come out. So I'm sorry.
I That's so interesting that you didn't feel like it was a double cliffhanger, but then readers are telling you it's a double cliffhanger. I find that so interesting where there's sometimes like a difference, I feel like, in where like
Yeah.
authors how they're viewing the story, and then once it's out in readers' hands, it kind of like changes into what readers are reading into the story. So that is interesting. And now I want to pick it up more. I mean, pick it up. I bought it already. So it's coming to me as soon as
Yeah.
it gets released. But I'm excited for a double cliffhanger. I know you said that you were reaching out to other authors for help with series structure, which I feel like is intimidating as all get out. Because right now I'm writing a standalone because a series feels like a lot of planning. Did you plan out ahead of time? Or were you like, okay, this is the standalone story. Maybe it would be a really great series. Now I have to figure out how to extend it? Or did you kind of already know that it was going to be a series from the beginning?
Knew in my heart that it was gonna be a series. Like, as I, like, was sitting down on my couch, like, I remember like it was yesterday, typing those first 50 pages of Blood Moon, like, I knew it was gonna be a three-book series in my head. However, selling, like, a three-book deal is, like, very uncommon, especially in this area, like paranormal fantasy, and then especially in a more niche area like with the black main character. It's just not very common, but it does happen. Like when you think about Blood at the Roof by Ladarian
Yep.
Williams, like that's a real thing that has happened. So, knowing this in my heart, I knew that I wanted it to be a three-book series, and I was manifesting that from the moment I started writing the very first words on page. We sold it as a two book deal. And so I knew that I would at least have two books. And to kind of help me like gear up for writing a series, I started reading more series. I generally like, I would say that like I've always read book series, but I've never read it from the angle of, okay, now you're writing a series. So I spent a lot of my time that summer while I was editing with Caitlin before we sold the book. I spent a lot of that time like just reading a lot of book series that were in my genre, like Crave, for example. Like I read that series. It was very interesting. But I was doing a lot of this research to help me kind of understand the cadence and the beats of how a series works a little bit differently than a standalone novel. And that was really helpful for me. And then I had an idea as I sold, like as we pitched the book to the publisher, like we kind of had like a small synopsis of what book two would be like. But we didn't have like the real like, meat and potatoes. It was just like, here's a little breadcrumb of what it could be. Good luck. And so that's kind of like how like I knew it was gonna kind of be like this, and I knew the third book would be even more removed from like my idea of the second book, but like it would be kind of like a very even small. It was like if you think of the second book in the series being a breadcrumb that I gave to the publishers, it was also like, and we could also have a third book, and here's the scent of what that book could be like. It wasn't really much of anything. And so as I was writing it and before we sold, knowing that like that the second book in the series, I knew it was also going to end on a cliffhanger. Like I just knew it. I knew it wasn't going to be completely rounded out. But because we were only working with a two-book deal, like that's what I had. And so when I was speaking to Tracy and she had told me about, giving me the whole light bulb idea about the Vampire Diaries, she was also telling me that something that helped her out because, the Legendborn cycle has grown significantly. I think
Yeah.
it was originally maybe a two-book deal or a three-book deal. I can't remember, but it's I think going to be either 4 or 5 books, something along those
Mhm.
lines. But she told me that, like, Brittany, as you write the first book, or since you've already written the first book, because at that point I was on submission, you have to go back and comb through to find where you left breadcrumbs for yourself.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And she was just saying how there could just be like a single line that opens up the world to
Mm.
something completely different. And I ran with that. I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. That's such good advice. I'm going to reread the story with this in mind and try to figure out how I could like really expand Blood Moon. So after we sold and during those edits that I was doing with my editor, I started thinking more and more about like how this would be a series and how we could build this world out. And I started like taking small pieces of each like part that I was adding into Blood Moon, and I was moving it into other documents as like the appetizers for the second book in the series. And now that I'm writing the second book in the series, I've been doing the same thing to write the third book, which hasn't
Yeah.
been announced yet, but we are having a three books in the series, and I imagine that whenever this goes out, it'll probably be announced, or it's not really
Yay!
that big of a thing. But yeah, like I'm really excited. So it's
That's
like,
awesome.
yay, it's gonna be an actual like three-book series, and that's exactly what I wanted. And I feel so incredibly lucky to actually have that now.
Yeah. I'm so excited. I love the series and I love paranormal, so I'm very ecstatic. And you're weaving in so much with this book. Like when I read the synopsis and everything you've been talking about it on your socials, I mean, you have werewolves and vampires and campus life, which is my favorite. Love going back to university.
Yeah.
How did you balance building this believable supernatural ecosystem on top of our own world while keeping your book like grounded in these amazing characters? Like, there's so much to like weave in. I feel like, how did you do that?
Yeah, Michaela, you're asking all the right questions. And I can tell you it did not happen all at once. It was definitely like a layered cake, you know? And
Mm,
the easier part about writing grounded fantasy is that we already have this world established. So I'm not really having to explain to the reader like what the trees look like and what like our general universe looks like because we all live in this world together. So that was so easy and that I was like, thank God, because that's going to be so much harder to do in a secondary fantasy world. So since it was grounded, that made it really easy. And then I was able to kind of like build on a legend. And legends are easy to understand because, you know, at some point, like someone's heard like a legend or an old wives' tale where it's like, oh, and this one story happened. And like it's believable enough that we have like Bigfoot and, you
yeah.
know, like all of these stories that kind of like make humanity and storytelling, verbal storytelling, what it is today. And that part felt believable because I just had to come up with my own legend and I had to make it feel real enough that it could be believable by some people. But I also had to take that idea and be like, okay, so this is a legend in a town that it exists, air quotes,
Mhm.
in our world. But now let's make this legend so that it's so far removed that like even if something were to happen, no one in the town's going to be like, oh yeah, it was definitely the vampires or the werewolves
Yeah.
because that's silly. They don't exist. But you're always going to have that one person on the outskirts of town, or maybe a couple people on the outskirts of town that are like, no, like my great 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 grandfather saw that with their own eyes. Like, no one believes us, but it's true. And that's like how we can like breadcrumb and like kind of like round out the story to make it feel
Mm.
more like, okay, like what if this happened, or what if that happened? What if someone did like see this thing, having like witnesses maybe see something that looked mysterious, but like maybe not, you know? So that's kind of how I built on like each layer to keep it grounded. And then like as I continued to edit, I continued to expand on the world out, the fantasy world, I should say, the paranormal elements of that world as the story progressed. And that really, really helped me kind of figure out where I was going with the story and how I was shaping this lore that I've created in the Blood Moon series.
And so with the lore, because you have vampires, you have werewolves, which I feel like are really embedded now, especially in like popular culture, of like kind of a very specific version of vampires and werewolves. And maybe that's thanks to
Yeah.
Twilight and its
Yes.
success.
Yes.
Um, how was writing about these supernatural creatures and like how did you go about making the lore your own so that it fit with the story that you were trying to tell?
Absolutely. I knew with I knew with using vampires and werewolves, it was already gonna be chaotic because there are so many different versions of these paranormal creatures that already exist. And I had to figure out like what I was going to use that already exists and what I was going to use that was going to be like just my own spin on it.
Mhm.
So I knew, for example, that like the vampires were going to be able to be daywalkers. Like they weren't going to be affected by the sun. They weren't going to be like burned up, you know, whatever. They also weren't going to be sparkling like the Twilight
Yeah.
vampires. But they were going to exist because that would really help make the story more believable. So I knew that. And then I had to decide, like, okay, so if my vampires are daywalkers, like, what are things that they can do? What are things that they can't do? Like, do they have like some magical element to them? Can they be invited into homes? How do you kill a vampire in this world? Because everyone like kills a vampire completely differently. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even answer that question until the second book of the series because it's not
Yeah.
really relevant in the first book. And then I had to do the same with werewolves. Like, what kind of werewolves are these? Are these the werewolves that like every bone in their body breaks and they're uncontrollably
Mhm.
shifting under a full moon every single time? are these going to be coded as violent werewolves? Because werewolves are always coded as very violent, very uncontrollable creatures. And I knew that I did not want to do that. I wanted it to be a story where they are shapeshifters more than they are, these
Mm.
vicious werewolves. They have control over how they shift into this creature. And I wanted them to be the heroes of the story. I wanted them to feel like they were kind of created to be these kind of creatures to kind of help save humanity from the vampires who are the opposite of that. Vampires were born of darkness, and a lot of their motives are to, drink blood and be merry and kind of do what it is that you want to do, rule the world, obviously. And werewolves are there to kind of keep everything in balance and keep everything in check. And I knew that like they were not going to be these vicious, terrible creatures, and we were going to find a way to fall in love with them. So, yeah, it was a lot of research too for me because I had to revisit some of my favorite stories that included werewolves and vampires. Obviously, the Twilight Saga was a big one. But then I also loved the Underworld series as a kid
Mm.
as well. So I rewatched all of Underworld, and I loved like it's very sciency, kind of like feels future worldy. But I love the dynamics that happens between the vampires and the werewolves and the hybrids in that story. And then I loved Van Helsing, so I revisited that story. I watched True Blood for the very first time. So I was like
Mm.
really trying to like get myself involved and like caught up with the different ways that other authors and other storytellers have written these paranormal creatures. And then I kind of just put my own little seasoning on it to make it
Yeah.
mine.
I love that. I'm very excited to see how you engage with these lores and make them your own. I feel like that's the most fun part about I don't know, I feel like Supernatural's having a little bit of a resurgence, which is really exciting. And
Yes.
that is like my favorite part of reading these books is seeing how every author kind of handles the werewolves and vampires a little bit differently. And I love they made them daywalkers because I feel like that's a little too limiting to not have them be able
Yes.
to walk out in the sun.
Yes. I agree.
And I was also reading, some early reviews of yours to prepare me to ask you some questions. And a lot of people are saying that you do a really good job of revealing details throughout the book that
Mm.
like add on those layers of like the supernatural politics and kind of revealing all those breadcrumbs as you've been saying. So how did you know when to reveal all that information, or did that come in the revisions with that like layered cake notion?
Yeah, I knew that like well, first off, you're brave reading reviews. But it's interesting that like that's some of the feedback. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But I knew that like I was going to like breadcrumb in the legend. I knew that like I would at least start the story with a legend. So Blood Moon starts
Mm.
with a legend. And it starts off with Mira's mother, Raina, telling her the story of the legends of this town. And she's telling her the story because Mirabella is obsessed with it. Like she just is a kid that's obsessed with paranormal. And it was very similar to me as a kid. Like I
Mhm.
was a kid in fifth grade, like watching Thriller over and over again because I just love one, that music video, but then two,
Yes.
I love the idea of like the way that music video ends where like there's this were cat, which also feels like it could be a werewolf. And at the end of the music video, like Michael Jackson turns around and he has his yellow eyes, and it's like, so does
Yeah.
it really exist? And I wanted the story, I wanted Blood Moon to start off that way, and like Thriller was like a song and a video that I had on repeat like in my life for the last couple of years. And so I wanted to start with a legend. So I knew that like if I started with a legend, this gives the reader like a little like toe dip into the water of what
Mhm.
they could expect. But we are learning about this through the eyes of the main character who doesn't really believe in vampires and werewolves because they aren't real to her. And I think we have to find a way to get her to believe that these things are real, without like immediately her just like jumping in and being like, yes,
Yeah.
like I believe it. this is real, this is true. She is a person that's very stubborn. She has to see it for herself and she wants to get answers and she's going to find a way to get answers. And each person she meets kind of opens up the door a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more until she literally is like, okay,
Yeah.
this is real. And that's kind of like where the story kicks off. And we end up learning way more about the legends, way more about the lore. But I would say, and I think that a lot of early readers too, like I would say some of the drag for some of the early readers is like that first 100 pages because it is a little bit slower as we're getting set up at university, as we're getting this world set up and grounded, as we're learning about the main character, and as she's meeting all these other characters in the world, there is going to be a little bit of lag there. But then once she discovers like, oh, holy shit, the story just kind of like picks up and then we like get even more information about this world now that we have the key to like enter. And that part was really, really fun for me. And I don't think that I like knew all of it completely, but I had a very good idea that that's how it was going to go when I first started writing
Mhm.
it.
Love that. And you said already that usually your stories are very character driven, which is why you're kind of more of a natural pantser. So, how, and also early reviewers are praising the cast, by the way, and so I'm very excited.
Thank God.
Yes. So, what is that process for you to like really flesh out a character, get into a character's head? Like, do you do any of that beforehand, or do you feel like the characters kind of come to life on the page as you start writing?
The characters, they always come to life on the page as I'm
Mhm.
writing. I used to listen to Deadline City, which was a podcast by Danielle
Yeah.
Clayton and Doretta Cordova.
Yes.
I
Two
was
of my
obsessed.
favorite authors, by the way. I was like
Yes.
this close to signing up or like applying for a low residence MFA because Danielle Clayton was one of the professors. And I was like, I would literally go just to learn from her. So, yes, I used to love that podcast. I'm sad that they don't do that anymore.
So sad. I was devastated. Like when I
Mhm.
tell you I loved everything that they talked about, like I ate it up, listened to multiple times. Like I love the podcast. But I remember Danielle talking about being a headlights writer, and she explained it as like not seeing more than what's past the headlights of a car if you're driving in the dark. And that was how I was writing a lot of my characters at first, because I was also kind of learning who they were, how they functioned, um, and how they would interact with the main character and how they would interact with the world. So, like, draft zero was really like we learned more about Mirabella and like the love interest. And then as the drafts continued and as the edits really progressed, we learn a lot more about the other characters and we build on them in a way that makes them feel real. And I did that by doing a couple of different things. One, I'm a hardcore Pinterest person. Like, I have a board for every book I write because it helps me visualize and see things so much more clearer. And then two, using Plotter, they have a character section, a character feature where
Mm.
you can have every character laid out and then like all of their motives, what their secrets might be, things that they like, things that they don't like. And I got this idea also from Lizelle Stanberry, where she has like an entire character like how to make your characters feel realistic section.
Mm.
And so I use a lot of that like to kind of draft zero my characters, so to say. And then I built on that as the story progressed to make them real. And I give them all these very different personalities that you would run into if you knew someone in real life. And I genuinely love them all so much. I want to get character art for all of them because I just love this cast of people. They're so great. And yeah, I feel like that's kind of like how I hoped to make them feel realistic is by really giving them their own backstories. I kind of knew where they all came from. I kind of knew what they
Mhm.
all liked. I knew who was going to be the one that had the witty one liners, you know, like I had them all kind of carved out as the story progressed, and that really helped me make them feel real to me, at least.
Yeah. That's great that I remember Danielle Clayton saying that she was a headlights writer. And I think that's a good way to describe it, that it does seem like since you are more of a pantser, you let the characters speak for themselves, but then as you layer the cake, you're ready to go back and just kind of make them more of like that fully realized person, which is great. And I think encouraging because sometimes, like writing advice on the internet can sometimes feel really
Yes.
prescriptive when every book or person has their own process. And so it's nice to hear that you don't have to know everything about your characters right away. You can kind of let them come to you and then build that in as you go through your other drafts. Was there a
Absolutely.
character who was really fun to write outside of Mira?
Oh, yes, Naomi, who is a secondary character. She's one of Mira's friends that she meets on the first day of classes, and she was so fun to write. I love Naomi. She's so witty. She's just like so silly. She's very much like I don't know how to explain her, but she's such a fun character. She was such a fun character to write, such a fun character to play around with in scenes, and she's also a character that like takes no shit from anyone. And so she pushes Mira to do a lot of different things. And she also asks Mira a lot of questions that like help Mira question herself, to be like, girl, like didn't you consider this? Or like, wait, are you actually believing that these legends really exist in this world? That's crazy. Do you really believe that? And then Mira's like, well, I don't know. Do I? And then she's like, okay, well, here's the reasons why I do believe it. So I love Naomi. She was so fun to write. And then I love writing Julian. He was harder for me to write because he was more of a mystery and he is kind of a grumpier character. His motives are totally different. And a lot of those motives are concealed from the reader and the main character for a long time. And he was fun to write, but definitely a challenge. Versus Seven came so easy. He's like our golden retriever. Cinnamon roll is so sweet, so
Yeah.
fun. Like very much like love me, but like, wait, do you actually love me? Like, what can I do to like
Yeah.
make this work? So he was a lot of fun to write as well.
Yeah. And it seems like you went into this story knowing a lot of like the themes that you wanted to explore. What are you really hoping that readers come away from with this book? Like, what emotions are you hoping that they feel?
Ooh, oh my God. That's so good. Being an emotional person, I'm trying to figure out what emotion I wanted readers to feel, which is so hard. I think I wanted, more importantly, for the main character, like when readers are reading Mira's story and her journey, I wanted them to really see like how anger can be used in a good way. Like anger is a gift, so they say.
Yeah.
Like if used in the correct way, like how can you take your own frustrations and use that to progress your own life and your own journey. I personally have had a lot of things in my life that have made me really upset, and I've wanted to change the course of the way my life looked because of things that have made me really angry. Mira is a character that has a lot of hidden anger. She has a lot of aggression. Like you end up learning that she's like broken things multiple times. Like she's broken like
Mm.
mirrors, broken like remotes, like has just been so angry because she doesn't have the answers that she's looking for after her mother just mysteriously disappears. And not having a mother figure in your life when things seem to be going so well for so long is confusing because your entire world really shifts and you have to start looking at the world differently. But I think anyone in that situation would also find themselves like being envious and jealous of other people who have
Yeah.
the things that you want. And Mira is someone that has experienced those things, and because of she doesn't really know how to place her anger at first, it pushes people away. And she finds herself as more of a loner as she's graduating high school and heading off to college. And she's finding herself wishing that she could rewrite her own story and just start over anew. But instead, she's stuck in the Midwest and she ends up at this university where she is actually able to kind of find answers, but also she's able to rewrite her story in a way that her anger starts to really make sense by the end of it.
Yeah, I really like that. I do think that anger can be a gift, and especially I feel like when you understand it more. So it seems like Mira's gonna go through that journey of like understanding her anger and using it for herself, which is really exciting to read
So
about.
exciting. Yes, 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 yes.
And we talked a little bit about, the publication process for this when we were first discussing Blood Moon. Is there something that has surprised you this time around, like with publishing, that has been different from the last two books?
Literally everything. Everything has
Yeah.
been surprising. Everything has been different. You know, working with a new editor has been different than working with my past editor.
Yeah.
Working with a new house, and this is actually Page Street is an indie publishing house, and they print all their books through Macmillan. So, like, I think of them as a branch of Macmillan still because they're funded kind of by
Yeah.
Macmillan, but they are their own indie publishing house that kind of like has been taking under the wings of Macmillan to help with support. Working with a smaller house has been kind of a breath of fresh air because everyone's really
Mm.
close. Everyone kind of like knows a little bit about everything at their offices, and most of them are actually remote as well. I'm pretty sure that Page Street is in Salem, which I think is kind of fun and
Love
spooky.
that.
I could be wrong, but I think that is where the offices are located. And but yeah, so like even the environment, like working with the people on the team, working with publicists, working with the marketing people has all been night and day. I would say that like I've never been prioritized in the way that I've been prioritized this time
Mm.
around. I was really thankful and really honored that Lauren took a chance on wanting to buy Blood Moon because we were selling during a time where, again, like there weren't a lot of people yet buying supernatural things with Black main characters. And then, two, like it's like, what do we do with the story? We want it to be a series. It's already going to be kind of niche. Like, how are we going to push this
Mhm.
story out in a way that makes sense to other people? And the team kind of fell in love with Blood Moon. I think many people ended up reading it, and then they started seeing my passion for the story, and that really kicked off everything. Like, I don't think I've had this much marketing support in my entire
Yeah.
life at all. And I feel really thankful because there's so much happening behind the scenes that I can't even talk about that has been like incredible. Like things like I like pinch myself every day because there's so many new things that have happened because of Blood Moon. There's so many things I've achieved like as an author because of Blood Moon, and it wouldn't have happened if Lauren did take a chance on me, and it wouldn't have happened if Will, who is the head person at this house, this publishing house, if he wasn't like, okay, let's go, let's do this.
Yeah.
So it's been incredible. It's really been an incredible experience, and it's very humbling for sure.
That's great that you were able to have this experience and find this publishing house that it seems like are as passionate about this story as you are, which I feel like isn't always the case for every author, every book. So that's really awesome that Page Street has been backing your passion and helping you get out there. And like, it's working, not just from you. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing Blood Moon everywhere and I'm loving it. So that is fantastic.
One of the things that I'm really excited about that we haven't touched on is like Blood Moon's going to have actual merch, which is
That's
incredible.
incredible.
So exciting. And I didn't like, it wasn't a thought on my mind. Like, it just wasn't anything that I could have ever thought about. But, they have partnered with this girl, or her business is called Thread It by Sabrina, and she does a lot of
Mhm.
bookish stuff. And they were like, Brittany, this is what we're doing. We're working with this person. She has a sweatshirt. What do you think about it? And I'm like, wait, hold on. What's going on, guys? And they were like, what's your size? We'll send you one right now. And I'm like, okay. And I get one in the mail. And like, when I tell you that I almost started crying because it's just so
Oh,
perfect. Like, it's
yeah.
just wonderful. And I used to work at a university too. I don't think I mentioned that at all. Like,
Oh, okay, yeah.
I used to work at a university, and I had so much love for like one, like the onboarding process for students. I used to be an admissions counselor for a very long time, and I love connecting students to what would be their future home. I love giving tours. I love bringing the idea of a university to life on each tour with their parents, just by the students if they were by themselves, and helping them like be able to visualize themselves where they were, and finding ways to make that work because university is expensive. And then outside of me being an admissions counselor, I also worked like for the marketing team for a long time where I hosted events for the school where the entire events would be getting high school students on campus to see what it would be like to be a college student. And a lot of that excitement, a lot of that drive came back to me as I was writing Blood Moon. So I was like, oh my God, it feels like I'm
Yes.
writing at a university again. And I was always excited to create different merch for all these events that I would host at the university. And so getting my own piece of merch for a university that I've created in my head just felt so surreal. And I was just like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like holding this in my hand. I
Yes.
can't believe that this exists. This is so exciting.
It's yet again kismet, like you were saying, like
Yes.
kind of like
Yeah.
full circle, stars align. And I'll be buying that immediately. I'm a merch girly. Anytime I can buy
I love
merch,
that.
I'm buying merch. So that is so exciting. Yeah, I love that it really is like full circle. Like you were so excited to have people come in and like experience their new life at a college. And like you said, have the college kind of come to life for them. And now you wrote about a fictional college and you get merch for it. That's so exciting. I love
It's so
that.
fun. Yeah, I'll have to show you the sweatshirt at the end, but yeah, I'll show it to you.
Yes. How exciting. Okay, so with some rapid fire questions, some of my favorite. Is there a piece of art that has had a profound impact on you?
Oh my God, is there a piece of art that has had a profound impact?
So
Definitely the Twilight Saga. I mean, like, it's cliche, and I think the reason it's cliche is because Twilight was everywhere for a long time, and it still is everywhere. It's actually had another resurgence, especially thanks to Book Talk. Twilight was such an impactful piece of media in my life because it helped me, one, fall in love with storytelling again. It helped me fall in love with this idea that vampires and werewolves could be in our world. And it really inspired me to start writing. So it has been very impactful in my life.
yes. Is there a character from your own work that you would love to grab a drink with?
Oh God, who would I grab a drink with in my stories? In the dark place, there is a grandmother figure, and I think
Mhm.
I would want to grab a drink with her, mostly just to see how she reacts. She's a little sinister in the book, I'm not gonna lie, but she has good intentions. She does. She's just like
Yeah.
kind of a serious woman that drinks her tea, and I would like to grab a drink with her and just have like I just want her to tell me about her life and give
Yes.
me like a history lesson of everything.
That's amazing. What is something totally unrelated to writing that you are obsessed with at the moment?
Unrelated to writing, I'm obsessed with West Coast Swing, which is a form of like ballroom dance. But it's a random partner dance, which means that like it's all improv based and you don't know what's coming next. And you could dance to it to any of the like current music that's out in the world. And
Mm,
it's just so exciting. Like I'm obsessed with it. I just started teaching it recently and I've been
so
competing in it
cool.
for the last few years. And I have like little like a trinket, my little medals like all over my room.
Oh,
There's some here, there's some
yeah.
over there. And I am obsessed with West Coast Swing. Like it's unhealthy, my obsession with this form of dance. It's so exciting.
That's amazing. I've seen videos online of this form of dance, but I'm sure that's really great for writing actually though too, to like have something that's improvisational and something that you're able to kind of like go with the flow, like a really good practice and just kind of letting things happen in the creative process. So that's cool.
Yeah,
I
it
like
really
that.
is. I think of each song like a new book. Like we're telling a story together. Like I'm
Yeah.
writing this story with this other person, and we are headlight writers. We don't know where it's gonna go, but here's the structure. The structure is the song, and we know what the tempo is, and here's what we're gonna make based off of what we've been given. So that's one of the reasons why I love it. It really gets me out of my head, but also like
Mhm.
there's a lot of dopamine that comes with exercise, so it's probably why I'm a little
Yes.
addicted to it. But yeah, it's great. It's great.
That's amazing. Okay, so I always say one of my worst traits about me is I love reality TV. It's a
Ooh.
problem. What reality show do you think you would totally crush?
Oh my God, crush, like be good at.
Yeah. Or wish you could be, but we'll have confidence. What can you totally crush?
Oh my God. I could probably be like a hostess or something for like maybe 16 and Pregnant or like the Teen Mom shows
Yes.
on MTV. I probably host it, but I don't know if I would be good at the actual stuff. Like, all my
Yeah.
reality TV things are just, like, random. Like, I love Botched. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't see myself in the show Botched. I hope not.
Yeah.
Like, I love 90 Day Fiancé, but, like, you know what I
Not
mean?
gonna
Like,
do
it's like,
that. Yeah.
not gonna do that. So, other than that, like, I love reality TV. I love the chaos of reality TV. I used to be obsessed with, like Love and Hip Hop, Atlanta, Little
Yes.
Women. Like, I love watching shows that give me an insight in random people's lives that I'm never gonna meet. Favorite
Yes.
stuff.
Yes. Love it. Okay, so you're gonna be a host of one of these reality shows. Maybe you can host the like sit down, the after show, you know?
Yes,
Or the reunions, which is a big job to host the reunions. Yes. Love
I would
it.
love that. Mhm.
And if you had to come with a warning label, what would it say?
If I had to come with a warning label, it would probably say, oh God, what would it say? I think my issue is I smile too much.
Mm,
So maybe beware the smiler. No. I smile and I laugh more than I want to, but it just happens so naturally. So people are
yeah.
always like, she's so bubbly, but I am super introverted person, but I could still be just like smiling, like, yeah, hey guys. So
Yeah.
maybe just beware the smiler. Like, she might look cute, but she could bite you. I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's great. And then where can listeners connect with you and find your work?
You can connect to me on Instagram, Threads, TikTok. I'm mostly active there, and you can find my works there as well. Everything is really in my link tree these days, so you can find everything about Blood Moon, where to get signed copies here in the future, where I might be going on tour here in the future as well on my
Ooh,
social media platforms. And yeah,
that's so exciting. Okay, so thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. I had an amazing time.
me too. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Pentapod with Britney S. Lewis on her newest book, Blood Moon. Go and buy this book, request it at your library and your local indie bookstore. You will not be disappointed. And please go follow Britney on all socials to follow along with this new series. Per usual, if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and share it with a writing friend or a reader who loves to dive into the minds of authors. We have a lot of great authors in store for you this season, so I hope that you keep tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and give a like and a subscribe. I'd love to hear any thoughts in the comments and have a conversation with you about this. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a follow so you will always know when the next episode is coming up. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.